Oh yeah, I've had a couple of messages asking about trance production and asking for a few pointers on that. So although it's late in the day, not long till submission date, I thought I'd just do a quick roundup. Well, not that quick maybe, but a roundup of some trance production techniques and some things to keep in mind. As a style of music, it sort of has a kind of hypnotic feel, which is achieved through repetition of rhythms and melodies and chords. It's not a style that develops really much in those areas. Development in trance music comes much more through manipulation of texture and timbre, and it's structured more along those lines, with sections that build up, sections that break down, big sections, small sounding sections. That's kind of how it's structured, as opposed to typical pop structures where it's much more to do with melody and harmony and lyrics. So first thing I'm going to do is I've got my BPM set to 134. Typically this style of music, if you use between 130 and 140, you're going to be okay. Sometimes some older styles of trance are slower than 134, but that's what I'm going to go with. Rhythmically, it's quite straight ahead, this style of music. It doesn't have a lot of swing or a lot of groove to it, unlike styles like drum and bass and dubstep and garage and so on. So it's quite straight ahead, and it uses a 4 to the floor kick drum, which means that you've got a kick drum on every beat of the bar. And that's the first thing that I'm going to get in, because that's like the main backbone of the track. So using the Ultra Beat drum machine, we've got a couple of preset kits which are quite useful. Trance Kit 1 and 2, I've just gone with Trance Kit 1. So those are just in the in the drum kit list, and there's plenty of sounds there that we can use. Down on C1 then, we've got our kick drum, and all I'm going to do is hit record and get in a couple of bars of kick drum on the beat. Really bad timing, but that doesn't matter because everything is going to be quantized. So quarter notes. Also make sure with the kick drum at least that your dynamics are fixed, because you don't really want a lot of velocity variation here. There we go, there's my kick, and I'm going to loop that through this 8-bar section. Just going to build up a little 8-bar section looking at some of the main production techniques and characteristics. So starting with the kick drum, I'm not going to record in each of these as we go because I've already done a bunch of recording. But we'll start just with the kick. Now we're going to build up various drum parts, each on a separate track. That's important so that we can edit and manipulate them independently later on. So Command D to make a new track and a new instrument with the same settings. There's a reason for doing it that way, which I'll explain in a bit. So done with your kick drum, Command D, another track with the same kit. Where's my on-off button gone? Hang on. Turn the hi-hats on. Almost as simple as the kick drum. All we've got, using these hi-hat sounds that are in the same drum kit, up on G sharp and A sharp. These classic 909 style samples, just doing those closed and open 8th notes, which I might move. This one, there. Okay, so with those, make sure your open hi-hats, the notes are long enough to lead you right up to the next closed hi-hat, otherwise you're going to get gaps. Which might be what you want, but I don't, not here. So there's my open and closed, open hi-hat and kick drum. Next thing I've done is stick in another hi-hat part. This one I've gone with a shorter note length, so it's based on a 16th note pattern rather than an 8th note pattern with this one. You'll notice I'm using Logic 10 and not Logic 9. I'm just forcing myself to get used to it. So I suppose more of a kind of, I don't know, it's not really a hi-hat sound, but it does the job. and I'm using that kind of syncopated 16th note pattern so that we've got quarter note, 8th note, 16th note patterns. So we're building up the sort of complexity of the rhythm texture. Next thing is a big dumb snare drum on beats 2 and 4. You'll notice hopefully that snare drum has got a ton of reverb on. And this is why I've gone with duplicating these tracks, so that if I want reverb just on the snare drum, I can stick it on that channel. And I don't have to worry about having reverb on my kick or my hi-hats. You could do that another way using a multi-output instrument, but just for simplicity, I've gone with the duplicate channel. Reverb here I've used something out of the Warped Effects drum transformers, a whole section, so I've picked something from there just to add kind of depth to my snare drum and make it sound a bit more distinctive. This is what it sounds like without the reverb. Yeah, so it makes it sound a bit more interesting and gives it depth. And that's kind of what, you know, a lot of the styles to do with, you know, I mentioned manipulating texture and timbre, so it's about layering, building up texture by adding different kind of interweaving parts, whether they're rhythm parts, accompaniment parts, bass parts, or whatever. None of those parts have to be complicated on their own, but the idea is, you know, you can build up something that has a lot of substance to it when it's heard all at once. What else have we got here? What's that? Okay. Yeah, another little line then, just using another percussion sound from the same drum kit, that trance kit. Can't find it now, but yeah, just another little rhythm to fill in some of the gaps that we've got in the rhythm. And as I say, it's just layering, building texture. And continuing in that vein, used a percussion kit here on a new track, so moving away from the trance kit, and just to add some African percussion, using the sampler, World Instruments, African kit. Just to touch on timbre in this style, it is almost all electronic, so you might get acoustic percussion sounds, bits of vocal, but generally speaking, it's synthesizers all the way for the bass and the melodies and the accompaniment parts and, well, everything really. But here we're throwing in a bit of African percussion, because trance does have almost like a sort of a world quality in some ways where it comes to the percussion. So I've just stuck in some conga here. Bit naff, but does the job. And just to say again, everything is quantized. So I've got a little bit of swing on those conga, but all of the rhythm parts are quantized and in time. Remember, if you find it difficult to play in time, you can always slow down the tempo while you're recording parts in, and that makes it easier and makes your quantizing more precise, which is important. So we're done with drums and percussion for now. Let's have a look at the bass. So again, simple, repetitive. Sound-wise, I've just gone with a synth bass sound from the ES2. I'll come back to that in a moment. So the idea with with the bass line, you know, you can make it really repetitive. You can just use one note, as I have done here. But the important thing is to try and get some sort of interplay between the bass line and the kick drum, so that they're kind of filling in each other's gaps. And a classic trance bass line is just to have offbeat notes. I'll show you what I mean. Where's my bass? Okay. You often hear that in trance before it became something of a cliche and people tried to move away from it, but that is perfectly acceptable if you want to do that and just have a note on the offbeat. But I'm going to go back to this other little pattern that I've got because I prefer it. Now, although we're only dealing with an 8-bar section here, the idea is, you know, as I mentioned, it's often structured through building up texture. So what I was going to do if I was going to build this up into an arrangement is just to gradually add parts every 4 bars or every 8 bars. Etc, etc. Alright, moving on then from the bass, got another little line here. Again, tons of repetition. The notes that I've used, which I should say, I'm basically going to sort of try and develop this into a little bit of an arrangement of the Take That tune, which is in G minor. So that's the key that I'm going with here. So my original bass note, that's just G, whoops, all the way. I should say with chords and keys, this is a style where you can keep it quite simple. You don't have to have tons of chords and tons of complicated key changes, because that's not where you're going to get the marks. You're going to get the marks for texture, timbre and structure and probably instrumentation. However, it's important that you do understand the key that you're in and what the notes are that are involved. So here is my key of G minor. Even if you only use one chord, let's say the chord, the root chord called G minor, make sure that you understand that you've got these 3 notes that are essential to use. So you're not going to use a B natural. You could sort of stick to these 3 notes if you want, but you do need to know what you're doing. I'm probably, as we go through, I'm probably going to use this one, E flat major, F major, B flat major. They're all the chords that are used quite a lot in the song. So this part here is just really based around those 3 notes: G, A, B flat. It's the first 3 notes of the G minor scale. Got a couple of Ds thrown in down here just for interest, but let's switch that delay off. Delay and reverb are very characteristic of this style. They help to add depth and interest again to the texture, but I'll just switch them off for now. Actually, while we're looking at this sound, let's have a look at the delay settings. Switch the bass off, because they are kind of important. So just an 1/8 note delay. I've EQ'd it. This is, it's a good idea to do this just to make the delay sound thinner, give it a different sound to the original part, this original synth sound. But again, that gives you more complexity in the timbres that you're using and helps to define the delay as distinct from the original sound. If you wanted to, obviously you could use quarter note delay. Or a dotted delay. Cool. Right, so we've got some drums, we've got some bass, so let's stick all that together with this other part. Right, coming back to the ES2 and thinking about timbre and development and interest, what you should do with most of the synth sounds you use, find your filter cutoff control, the one that is doing things, and map that to a physical controller if you have one. Well, hopefully you all are using keyboards which have at least a modulation wheel, if not other control knobs. So I'm going to wiggle my cutoff control here, Command L, and then I'm going to move my physical controller. So now, by tweaking that knob on the keyboard, I've got control over the cutoff, and that's going to be really important. So you can map as many controllers as you like to knobs, but if you only do one, make it the filter cutoff. Alright, so what's next? What's going on here? Let's have a look. Oh yeah. Right, so a contrasting timbre here, contrasting obviously with the drums and with the bass, the low end stuff that we've got here. We've got a completely different sort of sound. Trying to balance out the different types of sounds here. So with this one we've got something that's very thin, it's a lot more high pitched than we've had so far. Don't know what I've used here. Oh, and it's probably another preset. Synth strings, cyber cut. I've probably tweaked the envelope here to make it nice and short and staccato. So using a sound that's really short, just again as a contrast to the sounds that I've already got. The part then that I've done here maybe sounds a bit more complicated, but it's still all based around that G minor chord, the notes of G minor. So we've got D, and it's in octaves as well, so D, and then up to the B flat. So I've just used those notes. There's the notes of the G minor chord, D, G, B flat. Just with that A as a passing note. I think I played something like that. Now, on ideas like this, you can work out at a slower tempo, as I did. It's a good idea just to play what you've already got and then just try playing something over the top of it at a slower tempo. Once you're happy with something, hit record. Alright, so again, quantized, fixed velocities. And here I think I recorded it in one octave to begin with and then copied the whole lot up another octave. Whoops. Again, the delay for depth. So I've used the stereo delay here just to make this part sound nice and wide. So we've got an eighth note delay on the left and a dotted eighth note delay on the right. And again, I've EQ'd it so the delay is a sort of very thin sound. Cool. Next one. And surprise, surprise, it's another arpeggio based around the notes of the G minor chord. Oh, hang on, that's showing me an F minor chord, and that's because I recorded it in F and then transposed it. So there we go. So yeah, G, B flat, D, and then back to the G, and that's all it does. A little bit of variation at the end here, but again, it's a really simple pattern that just repeats. Okay, so the notes are nice and staccato, so we've got lots of space in that part. And the other significant thing about this is it moves in threes rather than in fours, so we've got groups of three notes, 1, 2, 3, before we come back. And that's what we call a polyrhythm, which is a nice way to get a little bit of extra complexity and a hypnotic quality into the texture of the piece. Group your notes maybe in 3s or in 5s, or anything other than 2s and 4s and 8s. It just keeps that keeps the part a bit more interesting. More delay, this time added through a bus. Can't remember why I did that, but here it's really starting to sound like the style that we're going for. The only other thing I've got in this little tutorial, and this is like, I don't know, we're up to 20 minutes or something. The only other thing I've got here is some pad part, just again for contrast, and you very often have pads in trance music. So just a G minor chord. Oh, look at that, I've moved the 5th. Little nod to Twin Peaks stroke Moby. Anyway, so here's the whole lot all together. That, I think, will certainly do it as far as this tutorial is concerned. So next one, I'm going to look maybe a little bit at the song, the Take That song, and ways that bits of that can be developed. So yeah, as I say, obviously deadlines are approaching, if they haven't already for you. I hope maybe those of you who are doing this style of music have found something in here that is helpful. Thanks for watching, see you soon.